ADHD Rewired episode. This is the podcast for those of us with really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. I'm Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker by training and a coach by design. I'm your host, and I have ADHD. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community. We are wired for connection, and you are not alone. Go to ADHDrewired.com to learn how you can join us in our free and secret Facebook group. Get additional resources for every episode, including links to any resources we mention on today's show. You can support us on Patreon, sign up for our email newsletter. You can request podcast postcards to distribute to your clients and support groups. Learn all about our award-winning coaching and accountability groups. You can co-work with us in our Adult Study Hall virtual membership community. You can do all of these things by going to our website at ADHDrewired.com. We know that starting is the hardest part, so let's get started. 3, 2, and 1. Welcome back to another episode of ADHD Rewired. Today's guest is Faigie Kobre. Faigie is a creative coach for people who don't feel artistic but love art. She works with people who have creativity scars and think they aren't creative because they can't draw. She has a passion for reconnecting people with their inner creativity to bring calm, color, and joy into their lives. Faigie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Eric.
So I love this topic because I think that, I'm a musician. There a while I was saying I used to identify as a musician in my former life. I am no longer saying that because that when you get away from the art or the creative expression, whatever it is, there's something that is felt, that is palpable, that is missing.
Right.
And this sounds like what you are really focusing on.
Right. And it's funny because there's so many people that don't tap into their creativity for such a long time. So there's definitely something missing. I mean, everybody is born creative. And, what happens is that our society is very product focused. So as soon as, when you're young, when you're little and you start being expected to produce something, and not everybody is artistic. I don't know how many lots, but there are people that are born with that pencil in their mouth that automatically know how to draw or can play, right? Are musical. And it's interesting is because nobody will say to the people who want to learn how to play piano or guitar, don't do it because you can't do it automatically. You're not good at it, right? But in art, that's what happens. If you don't know how to draw, naturally, then, okay, you can't draw. And it's something that it can't be learned. It's very interesting because a number of years ago, I was painting my house and I had this guy from the Ukraine. What he did in the Ukraine, he used to restore old churches, and he had a worker with him, and he was painting my boys' room, and he wanted to know what they wanted, what theme, and they wanted space. So he sent his worker in, and the worker just automatically started drawing astronauts and rockets and planets. And in his broken English, he was able to communicate to us that in school, they learned drawing the same way they learned math and science, because it's something that can be learned. I like to differentiate between creativity and drawing because you can be so creative without knowing how to draw. But so what happens is the people who don't know how to draw automatically, not naturally, they pushed off into the dustbin. It's not for you. So they right away, they get frustrated and they can't do it. And it's not fair. And I'm really trying to bring art back to everybody who wants to. I mean, I remember walking through art supply stores, drooling. And I wish I could use these art supplies, but I didn't know how. And it's just really, really a pity. And I really like to use, you said that you're a musician. I just really like to use that example because it's just ridiculous. You can't, you're not Mozart, you're not Beethoven. You can't sit down and bang out a concerto. You cannot take lessons. But on the other hand, if somebody wants to learn to draw, they can. It is hard work though. But the thing is, see, with music, if you don't want to learn how to play an instrument, you can listen to music, or there's other things to do. With art, there's so many ways to do art where you don't have to know how to draw. And that's why I've been trying to introduce expressive art. That's why I created this little micro course just recently on how to relax and unwind through these are 5 different mediums that you can use that are really amazing. And you don't have to, of course, people use these mediums to make the most amazing art, but you don't have to.
So, what was it that drew you into not just creativity and art, but really using creativity and art to connect with others, to help other people?
So I started out as an early childhood educator. I have a master's from way back in early childhood education, and the school that I went to, it was a very educationally progressive school called Bank Street College of Education. Anybody that knows anything about education would be familiar with the school. It's in Manhattan. They were very anti crafts, anything that was cookie cutter. They just were very into kids being creative with the materials. And when I was a preschool teacher and then a director, I was very into the creativity of the kids. And I got a tremendous amount of satisfaction watching what these young children, were able to do. And then I actually, when I stopped teaching to raise my family, I still stayed in that field in a little bit because I used to give workshops for teachers in like Head Starts and daycare centers on how to give kids art that was empowering and creative. And then what happened was I got interested in internet marketing, and I started, like they always say, if you're a writer, write what you know. So if you're going to create something for the internet, create something that you know. So I created a blog about art for kids, for teachers and parents. And I created some ebooks, and I was struggling with how to market it. So I ended up taking a marketing course. During the marketing course, I was having this whole conversation with one of the coaches about how so many adults feel non-creative because of how they were squashed when they were kids. And she said, would you consider starting a blog for adults to kind of teach them this information? And I was very intrigued. And I started doing research, and I started coming across this term mixed media art, and I was like fascinated. So I started taking books out of the library. Then I started buying books. Then I started buying supplies. That's quite a rabbit hole. Anybody that's into that knows that. And I was hooked. I was hooked, and I started a class here. I started doing stuff online, and I got an interesting perspective because I ended up also in the interim, I became an elementary school art teacher, which is what I do part-time. So I have this very long view of creativity. I worked with preschoolers. Now I work with elementary school, and I work with women also. I work with women who love creativity. So I get to see that, I get to see what's going on and where people get stumped. And I just feel that this micro course that I created is like, that's on my website, by the way, Creativity Reignited, is like the perfect way to get back into it, because it's getting people back to their childhoods. Let's do what you didn't do or had very little of, because people don't get enough of a chance to play when they're kids.
Let's talk about play in the realm of sort of creativity, right?
Mm-hmm.
I heard a definition once. The idea of play is that you're doing it for no purpose other than the enjoyment of it.
Right.
So,
right. But I'll tell you something interesting in terms of development, right? Because I study child development, is that all development has a sequence, right? Talking has a sequence. You start by making sounds. Then you go to syllables and you start stringing together words and sentences. Walking, you roll over and then you sit and then you crawl, and right? Art also has a sequence. Interesting. I have a grandson who didn't crawl. He went from sitting to walking, and he has certain issues that have to be addressed with an OT, an occupational therapist, because he missed that. So what happens with our creativity is the first steps are understanding what it is. This is a crayon. You put it on the paper, it makes a mark. It doesn't go on the wall, right? Or on the floor. It goes on the paper. We need to use those materials to learn what to do with them. And then as we get older, we start creating. So I had a story that I like to tell about when I was teaching. I had a kid come into my class. He was coming from Egypt, actually. He had never been in school before. He was about 5, but he was very bright. He had a very high IQ. And we had an easel in the room, and he went over to the corner and he started painting, but he was painting like a real 2 and 3-year-old. He was just moving that paint all over the paper. Over the months, I saw the development. Because he was bright and because he was ready for it, he started painting with more thought and started, thinking before he was using the paintbrush and the paint. And then he started adding classic, the head with the arms out of the head for a person. And it was just fascinating watching the development he was going through because he hadn't had the opportunity. So what happens is, if we're given the opportunities to use our just to play, it's going to turn into something. And the problem is most of us were not given those opportunities because our parents, our teachers just want that product. So they don't let it come naturally. And even if it's not going to be a Matisse or a Picasso, or maybe Picasso in his later years, right, when he was Cubist, but it's something's going to happen. Like, you could be creative. You can make beautiful abstracts. Something is going to happen with your creativity if it's allowed to flourish.
So you did not learn that you had ADHD until you were an adult, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so tell us a little bit about sort of maybe the intersection between this discovery and then really getting into art.
I was a classic. When I was a kid, there was no ADHD. No such thing, right? I was classic. It's funny. I always think of myself. I know there was a period of time when there was either ADD or ADHD, and now it's all ADHD.
Right.
Because I never thought of myself as so hyperactive. I had a really hard time focusing, and I wasn't like all over the place. But it was actually, honestly speaking, it was a therapist that my husband and I was speaking to that told, "You have ADD, you have ADHD." Whoa, a light went off my head, which made my husband really understand me. He realized that I was just, whatever I was doing was not, purposeful. It was just because of what I was. And it just made me realize also how art was so beneficial. I don't remember that it kind of intersected. It kind of also makes me, it's funny. What it helps is I'm an elementary school art teacher, but I do a very different kind of a program. A number of years ago, I discovered on Facebook a group about this kind of method. It's called TAB, Teaching for Artistic Behavior, and it's a choice-based program. What I have is I have kids doing painting, collage. Right now I introduced weaving. They're doing construction with cardboard. And I was just thinking to myself last week how a lot of people couldn't do this. Because of my ADD, I'm able to just be here and then be there and listen to this one. She's, wants to, build a house and needs a place for it. I'm just able to be all over the place for the kids. I think a lot of people who are more traditional, they'd never be able to run a program like this.
Well, I think you were telling me when we were first talking that you see a lot of in schools how it's more about how the art makes the teacher look. So they have everyone do these exact sort of works. And I thought it was just a really interesting sort of concept that it's more of a reflection of the art teacher, or like the perception is there. And so there's not that sort of empowerment of kids to even use their creativity. So it's not a surprise, if this is happening for kids as adults, that when we have these creativity scars, especially with people with ADHD, who it's like, we're given the 3 directions, but we want to do it the 4th way. Right. Like, because those directions don't make sense, but we had this idea, and then, we can be punished for that expression of the idea because we weren't following directions.
Right. I recently was telling somebody, is like, I don't consider myself an art teacher. I consider myself an art facilitator. Because like sometimes the kids will ask me, can you draw this or that? I say, no. What do you mean you're an art teacher? So, give me a picture. I can do maybe some kind of decent thing, but that's really what I am. I'm an art facilitator. And like when I think of what would I not have given when I was growing up to have something like this? I mean, how many kids? I tell these kids sometimes if they complain, sometimes I'll give them a requirement, which is rare. And I'll say to them, do you know what art is like in most other schools, if they even have art? The teacher holds up a picture and says, this is what we're doing. I try to get them to appreciate what they have. It's such an amazing thing, just art. There's so many different ways to do art. The reason I did this micro course is because I want people to get back into that playing. You need to get back into there without the fear of making mistakes and you're going to do something wrong because it's so baked into our psyche.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I want to dive into this discussion around creativity scars and how really tapping into creativity and maybe re-tapping into creativity can really help with our healing. So we will be right back. Ready, set, register. Our summer registration and kickoff event is just around the corner. You may be asking yourself, registration? I'll get to that in a little bit. While you may be listening to this on the podcast, we are more than just a podcast. Because support for this show comes from ADHD Rewired's award-winning online coaching and accountability groups. Learn more at coachingrewired.com. If you want to learn how to prioritize your goals, to create to-do lists that makes sense to you, figure out what actually gets you activated to move forward with your goals, and build relationships with other adults with ADHD who truly understand you, then this group is for you. How can you join us? The first step is to head on over to coachingrewired.com and add your name to our interest list. From there, you'll receive instructions on what we'll need from you so you can join us for our upcoming summer registration kickoff event next week on Thursday, May 4th at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. Registration is by invitation only, so don't wait. That's coachingrewired.com to get started on your pre-registration process. First, by adding your name to our interest list, then following the instructions to complete that process. Once you're done, don't forget that last step to RSVP, and I hope we get to meet you on Thursday, May 4th at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. And why join us for the kickoff? Well, early registration discounts are back. Get $500 off on ADHD Rewired coaches Kristen Martz and Brian Entler's sessions. More information is at the website. And don't forget, this summer, we're doing a little bit of a lighter load, so that means less spots are actually available, so don't wait. Go to coachingrewired.com. All right, we are back with Faigie Kobre. All right, so creativity scars. I think this is like a term that I think I've seen more over the last handful of years. What are creativity scars?
I actually got that term from a book. There's a book I read called Creative Confidence. I think it was by a fellow named Tom Kelly. He was definitely one of the authors. I'm not sure if it was his brother or there was another one. But even though we are adults, the problems we have with creativity is that we had scars as kids. And it's still, they're healing the inner child. There was a guy, John Bradshaw, I think it was. He wrote a very famous book, Healing the Child Within, because we're really all still children within, in some ways more than others. And those creativity scars are when we were not allowed to create the way we were that we really wanted to. And we were, especially people like us, right? Especially ADD people like us that just want to do our own thing. And I have a nephew. I remember he came home and told his mom, this was years ago, and he ended up dropping out of school in high school. The teachers, they keep bossing me around. They keep telling me what to do. It's very funny because he dropped out of school. He didn't do high school. he bought himself a Tesla recently.
So he's doing okay.
He's like 17, so so you have those. Then you have people that are in maybe didn't have so much art when they were younger, so they didn't have those scars, but then they go into elementary school and they'll be told, you're no good in art. You're no good in art. You can't do this. This is not good. And you know what I've also realized is that sometimes people give themselves complexes by looking at what other people are doing also, right? So let's say they didn't get some of those negative comments from teachers and parents, but they look at their friend who knows how to draw, who does these really cool comics, and they can't do that. So that in itself, and just what they say, comparison is what, there's a famous expression.
I think it's like the comparison is the thief of joy.
Yes.
Like that,
Yes. When you compare yourself to others, you're going to come up wanting. And it's such an important thing to just learn to create and enjoy the process without worrying about what your friend is doing, what all the other artists. There's a very famous, you ever heard of the book, The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron?
Mm-hmm.
So she talks about all the ways people sabotage themselves, Look at what your friend is doing. Don't get started. She doesn't necessarily go into the childhood creativity scars, another well-known guy, Sir Ted Robinson. He has
a famous
probably
TED Talk,
one of the most watched TED Talks on creativity. And I read one of his books where I had done a lot of research on creativity. And he says that most people only recover after their education is over. Once we're finished with our education, and then we can start blossoming. Unfortunately, education is a very narrow, and ADD people don't do very well with very traditional education. Have you noticed?
Well, I tell you, I was a student over the pandemic at a YouTube University for a while, and learning how to. Me and Bob Ross, we hung out some evenings as I was kind of exploring some. Like I was always like, I want to kind of get into painting, It's and so I made maybe 3 or 4 paintings that were pretty nice. I spent too much money on art and like paint supplies, and I haven't picked any of them up in like a year and a half. But it is interesting. I while I enjoyed it, one of the things that I was like, the part that I actually didn't enjoy was similar to what I didn't enjoy when I used to be a gigging musician, and that was the tearing down when you're done, the cleaning up when you're done. Like as a keyboardist, as a piano player, like when I used to play in bands, like I used to have 4 keyboards, and like I would have to make sure I can get into the house PA system, and it was always just like so much on the executive functions, and then by the time I was done with the gig, I was exhausted because it was it was late, and we're partying a little bit. Well,
that is so interesting that you said that, because I hadn't tied it into ADD, but I have a majorly hard time cleaning up after an art session. What I find is I make a mess, and then the cleanup is a separate activity. Like when I'm in the mood, I have to get in there, and then I go and I clean up and I organize. I cannot clean up right afterwards. And I think it was recently that I realized it's an ADD thing.
And for me, I was like, these paintbrushes aren't cheap. And if you don't clean the paintbrushes right away, like you kind of ruin the paintbrushes.
You stick them in water until you're ready.
It's good to have those workaround solutions for that.
By the way, Murphy's oil. If you have any paintbrushes that are caked on and really not usable, put them in Murphy's oil overnight. Good as new.
Okay. So, it's when we think about people who don't identify as artists, but maybe they have some maybe creative tendencies, and maybe they've dabbled in this or that. If someone is not like, if their goal is not to create art, but they're looking for ways to kind of become more like open to sort of tap into just more general creativity, to maybe things around like perfectionism. I know that so many adults with ADHD struggle with perfectionism. And I think that art could be a great sort of medium for kind of learning how to combat that.
Yeah, Brene Brown talks about perfectionism a lot in her books. But the interesting thing that I do is that I have these, looking if I had one over here, I have the way I teach people to do art is in a book, in a journal, like in an art journal.
Okay.
Because when I first started, I was making things and I had like canvases and things floating all over the place. It's like, what do I do with it? But if you have everything in one place, then you can just go and work at it. You can even do writing in it. There's mixed media art journaling that people will do these very messy pages and then write over it. And there are many ways to be creative. You can be creative with cooking. You can be creative with writing. There's a lot of different ways to be creative. Part of what I find so wonderful about the art is because the hand use is very healing also. There was another book I read called The Creativity Cure, written by a husband and wife team. Barron is the last name. And they just talked about hand use. So even though, let's say, maybe knitting is probably not the most creative, it's very, very meditative and very, very calming. I actually just taught my kids, introduced them to weaving, and I was sitting next to a kid that's really ADD. And she said to me, "This is very calming." So when you have it in a book, you don't have to show anybody. So it is a way to do it. You can do doodling. Like the 5 mediums that I introduce are doodling, acrylic painting, watercolor painting, a collage, and alcohol inks. That's a new medium to a lot of people. But all of these mediums have a tremendous opportunity to go from very expressive, very just playful, to doing things, of course, that are extremely, extremely artistic. And I, I want to tell you something interesting, because a number of years ago, when I started a mixed media class in my house, I met a friend of a friend somewhere, and I had one of my art journals with me. And I said, "Oh, I'm looking to start a class, an art class. Would you like to join?" She said, "Oh, me? I'm not creative. My mother was a sculptress. I can't draw a straight line." So I opened up my book and I was showing it to her, and she said, "Hey, I could do that. It's a good time in my life. I'm going to join." And she was part of my class for about 4 years, and she moved overseas. And she recently contacted me. She emailed me that she was taking these acrylic painting classes. She said, "I never could have done this if it wasn't from your class," because it just gave her the confidence. And she moved through doing these like messes and fun things. And now she got more interested. It kind of opens you up to let you see if you want to go forward, you like any of these mediums, you want to go somewhere else with it. There's a big, wide world out there. Like, it also during the pandemic, it was art had a real big comeback.
Yeah, not surprised. I mean,
Right.
if I went out and made multiple trips to Michael's and got all those supplies, I figured I was not the only one.
Oh, for sure.
So why do you think that art is such an impactful medium for people with ADHD? Like how is this helping us?
First of all, people with ADHD do very well with sensory activities. They give the kids in school, or even adults, right? They give them those balls to squish, sticking your feet and your hands in the sand, water. All of these things are very, very healing and meditative. And art lets you connect right away. There's nothing. I've done a lot of different activities with my group in mixed media art, and they say that there's something about the paint that meditative. I was just doing it last night. There's something about the paint on the paper or on the cardboard or whatever it is. There's just something about it. And, and then there's this one of the mediums that I teach is alcohol inks. That's a very interesting medium. It's a little dye in an alcohol base, and it works on non-porous backgrounds, and you just drip it and it spreads. It's almost like getting back into nature. You know how healing nature is, but you're just interacting with the medium, and it's good for everything that ails you. In one of these books, it says that studies have shown that it works better than antidepressants.
Do you think that the slower a medium is to kind of dry, the more mindful we have to be when doing it?
No.
No?
I don't find that. I mean, alcohol inks dries in about 10 seconds, and it's a
Okay.
much more uncontrollable medium.
Okay.
And I have a little heat gun that I use. You can dry things very quickly. Like if you want to do painting and doodling on top, you paint, you take your heat gun or your blow dryer and
Okay.
you can dry it in no time.
'Cause I
I
attempted
have
to
a
do
friend that
I attempted to do an oil painting during.
oh,
I had no idea how long that takes to
oh,
dry. Oh, it
right.
was like a month.
I would never, right. That's why I would never do oil painting. It's, forget it.
I was like,
Yeah.
who has the patience for this? Like, I
think,
put it
well,
on a shelf, and a month later, it was still kind of wet.
So I have a friend that's an artist and she does these enormous outdoor paintings of birch trees and like lakes and stuff. I think what she does is she's constantly going to work on it. And then when she's
Mm.
finally finished, she just leaves it on her easel. But yeah, oil painting, that's the one that takes the longest. I mean, alcohol inks is the fastest, then comes watercolors and then comes acrylic. None of them take a long time to dry though.
Mm. All right, let's take one more quick break, and when we come back, let's kind of explore how do we get started with art. So we will be right back.
Hey there, you. Yeah, you. Are you constantly forgetting people's names? Often the very moment they tell you their name, you awkwardly call everyone buddy or pal or hey you just to cover it up? Well, then I have an amazing, not actually real solution for you. Introducing the Name Frame 3000. These non-existent high-tech glasses use Chat G-It Fake 4 AI technology. They can actually sense introductions and automatically take pictures and capture this person's name 5 times faster than you can even forget a name. Yes, it's that fast. And with Bluetooth technology, it instantly pairs to your phone and has a built-in bone vibration speaker that only you will hear. When you put it into the oh shit, what's their name mode, your name frame glasses can quickly identify who you are looking at and will even whisper their name in your ear. Plus, with Chat G It's Fake AI technology, it can not only tell you their name, it will remember what you talked about with them and will give you a question to ask them based on your last conversation with them. Now, you could forget about trying all those name association strategies where you get lost in your own thoughts trying to come up with clever names to remember your first cousin's new partner's name. The Name Frame 3000 can also help you get out of those really awkward moments when you look over at your lover and simply can't recall their name. It could do this if only it were something that were more than just a playful concept. But hey, isn't it fun to dream? But don't worry, while the Name Frame 3000 might just be a lighthearted joke, the help and support you get from the ADHD Rewired community is absolutely real. Whether it's the podcast, Facebook group, coaching groups, adult study hall, or Patreon, we are here to help you embrace your ADHD brain and provide you with genuine coping strategies, resources, and a whole lot of laughter. Join us on the ADHD Rewired podcast for insightful interviews where you'll find helpful tips and a supportive community who understand the struggle of having an ADHD brain. So what are you waiting for? Head on over to ADHDrewired.com to subscribe and join us on this wild ride. And remember, even though the Name Frame 3000 is just a playful idea, I actually wish someone would invent this because I would absolutely buy it. And that support and the camaraderie of the ADHD Rewired community is genuinely here for you. Hey, are you looking for people that you can body double with to get your most important tasks complete? Would it be helpful to work with other people to keep you on track with the next thing on your to-do list? Sometimes I do too, because when ADHD gets in the way of my most dreaded tasks, I've always found that working with others helps me to stay engaged, which is why we created our Adult Study Hall community at adultstudyhall.com. It's only $19.99 a month, and it's free to try for the first week. If you like working in time blocks and being able to check in real time to give updates on your progress, then you'll gain access to our ASH Plus, or Adult Study Hall Plus sessions, which are our themed and guided sessions that happen every week. But if working at your own pace is more your speed, then our 24/7 drop-in room, or ASH 24/7, is open to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It is free to try for the first week and only $19.99 a month after that. Come work with us at adultstudyhall.com.
All right, we are back. So, I think there's a lot of people listening who maybe they've been thinking about, exploring some creative pursuit. Even myself, like I sometimes surprise myself on that I can draw. If I'm looking at something, I can kind of draw it, and this is actually something I only recently discovered that I can do. I guess this is another COVID discovery. Um, but I think for some of us, like we don't know where to start. Where do you suggest starting?
So it's very interesting. He said that there's a fellow that I follow. His name is Danny Gregory. He has an online course platform called Sketchbook School with a K. And he's an artist. He has a bunch of books. And he just recently put together his own animated video on YouTube. It's called The Artist Who Couldn't Draw by Danny Gregory, if you want to check it out. But he says if you draw every day, your drawing will get better and better. It's really all about consistency. But what I will say is that I have discovered, like I said, I have this micro course on my website. It's Creativity Reignited, where I give a little short video on each of the mediums: acrylics, watercolors, doodling, collage, and alcohol inks. And I just show you what you could just choose one of them, or you can choose all of them. You don't have to spend a lot of money. None of these things are very costly. You could go into Walmart. I don't know if you're in the United States, but if you are, I'm sure there's a Walmart not too far from you. The cheap paints, the apple barrel paints, I pay 50 cents for them. You get some brushes and some paper. It's a very low threshold. Then, of course, once you get interested in it, and then you start, buying and buying. I don't go to Michael's that much anymore because they stopped their coupons. I used to get these great coupons from them. I get most of my stuff online. But if you go and you look at, let me see what acrylics is, let me see what watercolors is, let me look at collage, doodling, alcohol. So let me just see. If you get this micro course, it'll just kind of start you in with like expressive art, because expressive art is really just about expressing it. Just get it out there, play with the colors. I think that's a great place to start. I think what happens is, first of all, there's a lot of people that are spectators as opposed to doers. There are people that watch countless art videos without ever picking up a material to create, right? So if you're listening to this and you're one of those people, get off your couch and go get yourself some materials, a book, and start creating. There's millions of YouTube videos. There's millions of courses you can purchase. I just think that my micro course is a good place to start because it's taking you back to where you should have started years ago and allowing you to play with materials, see if you like it enough, keep playing, and then you'll see where you want to go from there.
What have been some of the maybe more surprising things that you've seen doing this work that you've been doing as you see people, kind of discovering their or rediscovering their sort of artistic just ways?
What I find interesting is I was thinking about this recently, how I do this, like I mentioned, I do this very choice-based program in my classroom, but I was part of a membership. It was during the pandemic, actually, when I was doing classes with the kids online. So I needed more lessons. So I joined a membership where she was giving me lessons. So I really only used it then, but what I have discovered is that I have been using a lot of those kids' lessons for my adults. And I find that, adults don't necessarily get the same thing as kids. Like there's a website, The Art of Education, where I get a lot of ideas from. So many adults would benefit from doing so many of the things. I'm not saying things that are in the lower grades, but in the higher elementary, like middle school, like the 7th, 8th grades, or the high school things. I think it would be so beneficial. And sometimes people who start teaching adults, start teaching them as adults, and they don't realize they didn't get all of that stuff that the kids are learning. That was just a very interesting thing for me, that I'm able to give these kids things to adults, and they love it.
So as a artist with ADHD, how do you know when a piece of work is done?
One of the things I think people have to stop is to stop saying, I'm going to stop now because I'm going to ruin it, because it doesn't matter. You have to be able to take chances. So that's the good thing about doing things in a book, in an art journal. You could say, let me go on. What else can I do? And I think it's done when you can't think of anything else to do with it. So if you're doing something like I do in the abstract, in the expressive world, you're doing more abstract. So you could say, okay, let me see if I can add different colors to this. Can I add doodling to this? Can I maybe use it to cut up for collage? When you kind of stop, you say, I don't know what else to do with this, then it's done. Or you just like it. You say, oh, I just like the way that looks. But it's very important not to get scared that you're going to ruin it. So what's going to happen? What's going to happen? You can fix it up. Because I've seen that, because I do classes. I give classes also, like in-person classes, like parties. And I hear that a lot from people. So I'm going to stop now because I'm just going to ruin it. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. You gotta be brave, and just what else do you want to do with it? And then, and one of the important things is if you have the right color schemes, you're not much you can do wrong. That's very important. Like if you learn a little bit about color and you know that you can't just throw all the colors onto it, you have to learn which are the colors that make mud, which of the colors go well together, then you'll be okay.
Do you have any tricks to help us remember that?
Yeah. So there's a color wheel. Okay. You have your three primary colors, red, blue, and yellow. Then you have those colors that are mixed from those colors are secondary colors. Okay. So yellow and blue makes green. Red and yellow makes orange. Red and blue makes purple. Okay. So then you have a color wheel that shows you that. So the best way to know the best colors, just like in short, to use are the colors that are next to each other on the color wheels. The ones that are, so let's say you have red, orange, yellow, those colors will look nice together. You look at a color wheel, you see the three colors that are next to each other, those colors work well together. Another color scheme that works well together is when you have a monochromatic color scheme, like you pick, let's say, blues, and you just do all shades of blues. That'll look great. And you can always add in a neutral to any of these color schemes, a black, a white, a gray. Those, the monochromatic, analogous it's called, and the colors are next to each other in the color wheel. Those colors always look good together.
I was always so fascinated by my son's ability. Even when he was really, really young, he just he understood in a very, I think, intuitive sense of how colors mix together. And he always took joy in quizzing me on them and correcting me when I got them wrong. But I mean, it is kind of interesting because, like, when I, as we were saying before, that some people have it, like they just have a natural ability. For someone like my son who understood color, I think in a very innate sense. I remember a number of years ago, I was reading a college level music theory book. I'm a self-taught musician. I cannot even read music. I wish that I could, but I play by ear, right? But I was reading this very technical music theory book, and it all made sense to me. Like none of it like confused me at all. And I felt like there's this like, I don't know, this knowing, this knowing of not knowing how you know, but you know it. And it's just, and I think that for a lot of people, there are things alike, whether it's painting, drawing, music, that they haven't even given themselves an opportunity to discover this. I have a friend who I met through a local chat group a number of years ago, who in her late 50s, I think she started painting, and one of the very first paintings she made was this gorgeous painting of a horse that is like on her mantle. And I just was fascinated by the fact that like she had never painted before. This was her first painting, and like it was a legit really good painting.
Grandma Moses? She
No.
started in her 70s. She was a very famous folk painter in her 70s.
It kind of makes me think too of there's this this principle around self-awareness called the Johari's window, where in one area you have the parts of yourself that you're aware of and others are aware of as well. You have your private self, so the things that you're aware of but others aren't. You have your blind spots, the things that others see in you but you don't see in yourself. And then you have that sort of fourth quadrant, which is the not known or not known yet. And I just wonder how many people listening right now have some kind of creative talent that they've never even tried.
Right.
That if you just give it a couple tries and see what happens.
Right. Yes.
It's because to me that is so cool when you can go, oh my gosh, like I can do this.
Right. There's so many things that we could do we don't know. It's just interesting listening to you talking about reading that very technical book, because that's a classic ADD thing, that when you're interested in something, because I'll listen to something like a speech that's a little bit more technical, my mind will go, but my kids used to laugh when I got into internet marketing. I would watch the most boring videos, and I was fascinated.
Yes.
Because when we like something and we have an interest in something, that's,
It's when I first started really focusing on ADHD, over a decade ago, I've subscribed to the Journal of Attention Disorders, which is a scholarly, kind of the white paper kind of journal, like boring as hell, dry as hell, and I was fascinated by it because this was what I was interested in.
Right.
Right. So it's, we can go in deep to anything we become interested in.
Right.
So tell people kind of how, I know you mentioned your website, but so what are these, you said these mini courses?
So it's not it's one, I call it a micro course because it's like really small. So if they go to my website, creativityreignited.com, right on there, it is a login for a free micro course and you'll just have access to it. And it's just a short little course with little videos on it. There's actually 2 PDFs on non-art activities or creative activities to get your mind thinking. And it's just to get you started, to see what you're missing and what art can do for you.
All right. So I'm trying to imagine right now, the listeners, maybe they're sitting there on their couch and they're like, oh, that sounds like a cool idea. They don't want to go down a rabbit hole right now, but maybe next to them, they have something to draw with. Can you give them maybe a prompt?
So, yeah, because you'll in one of the mediums is doodling. And I have a couple of activities in the video of doodling that will give them some things to do.
Give them a prompt right now so they can just go from the audio, from the podcast.
So what I have, I'll tell you what I have in, you see, it's very hard for me sometimes to think if I'm doodling, to think of what doodling marks to make. So I have included in this little course, I have like a sheet of 30 doodles that I prepared for them. So if you want to doodle, so one of the activities I gave them was making some kind of shape and then just filling it up with doodles. So they can do so. You could take a whole bunch of circles and make circles on the paper and overlap them. And then you're going to have a lot of different shapes. Fill them with doodles, so you're not just, whenever we're listening to something or speaking on the phone, often we just doodle. So here you'll just make something that could be really pretty, actually.
Awesome.
Yeah.
The website is creativityreignited.com. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing kind of what you do with our listeners. And I hope you are continuing to create and inspire others with their creativity.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you.
This is Eric Tivers. Thank you for listening and congratulations for making it to the end. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community focused on learning, growing, and connection. The website is ADHDrewired.com. You can find time-stamped summaries and additional resources for each episode. Apply to join our free and secret Facebook community. Learn more about our award-winning intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups. Join the Adult Study Hall virtual co-working membership community. Find all the other podcasts on the ADHD Rewired Podcast Network. Sign up for my email newsletter to get exclusive content that you won't hear anywhere else. And use the search tool to find episodes on specific topics. You can do all of this at ADHDrewired.com. While you're there, click on the Patreon button. If you are a regular listener, consider making a monthly contribution by becoming a patron. If you are able to financially support my work, it would mean a lot. This show is free to you, the listener, but it's not free to produce. Plus, patrons get cool perks like ad-free episodes and access to recordings of coaching calls, and $25 a month patrons can join me once a month for a group coaching call. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Tivers. You can like our Facebook page at facebook.com/ADHD Rewired. If you're a coach, therapist, or related professional, connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/Eric Tivers. Subscribe to ADHD Rewired on YouTube to see selective interviews and other videos I've made. Podcasts change lives. You can make a difference in someone's life by spreading the word about this podcast. Mention it in your online communities on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, or wherever you hang out online. And be sure to share it with your friends, family, your therapists, your coaches, doctors, siblings, parents. And if you, your coach, therapist, doctor, or ADHD support group leader would like a pack of podcast postcards to hand out, you can request those at the website, ADHDrewired.com. If you are a member of CHAD, ADA, or any other ADHD support group, please be sure to tell them about this show and all the shows on the ADHD Rewired Podcast Network. You can even show them how to download it on their phone. And if you really loved this particular episode, please hit share on your podcast player. I'm only one person, and I do count on you to help spread this message. One of the biggest things that you can do to support this podcast and help other people discover it is to leave an honest rating and review on Apple Podcasts or any other app that supports reviews. And don't forget to hit subscribe so new episodes are automatically pushed to your favorite podcast app. Looking for more ways to listen and learn? Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at Audible by going to audibletrial.com/ADHD Rewired. Here is my list of must-listen-to audiobooks updated July 2021. Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. Attached by Amir Levin and Rachel Heller. Atomic Habits by James Clear. The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. Crucial Conversations by Carrie Patterson. The Coaching Habit by Michael Stainer. The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Rest by Alex Sujong Kim Pang. The 5-Second Rule by Mel Robbins. Make It Stick. The Science of Successful Learning by Peter Brown. The Productivity Project by Chris Bailey. Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics by Dan Harris. Change Your Questions, Change Your Life by Marilee G. Adams. I always recommend to my coaches and admin that they read that book. The One Thing by Gary Keller, a required reading for all of our coaching group members. Procrastinate on Purpose by Rory Baden. The 4 Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer. And if you're looking for something a little bit more magical, I have fallen in love with the Harry Potter series, and the narrator, Jim Dale, is amazing. And of course, if you haven't yet boarded the Brene Brown bus, all of her stuff is great, starting with Gifts of Imperfection, Daring Greatly, Rising Strong, and The Power of Vulnerability. And if you're an entrepreneur or leader, be sure to check out her book, Dare to Lead. Do you have something that you would like to share? Click on the podcast tab at ADHD Rewired. Click the button to be a guest at the top of the page and schedule a 15-minute interview. This is Eric Tivers, reminding you to keep learning, growing, and connecting. Self-care is not selfish. No matter what you get done or don't get done, you are still enough. And no matter how hard it feels, we can do hard things. And we don't need to do them in the hardest way possible. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next week.